Chicago Board of Rabbis Torah Lishma session taught by David Rosenberg on Wednesday, August 9th, 2017 at Beth Hillel Congregation B'nai Emunah in Wilmette. Is it a small world after all?
I very much appreciate David's willingness. Let me put my phone on quiet. David's willingness to prepare some Torah for us. Those of you who don't know David, he's been in Chicago for a number of years now. Spent some time at the University of Chicago as the Hillel director, and has been, what's the official name of the institution you're with now?
Jewish Child and Family Services.
Oh, so it's part of Jewish Child and Family Services, but the specific day school program they have, and involved also in helping to foster a relationship between the Orthodox community and some of the agencies in terms of making people sensitive in the agencies to the particular needs of the Orthodox community. It's a bracha on both sides of folks willing to work together. David has also been on the dark side, perhaps one can say, as the president of a synagogue, but he's very active at the Young Israel of West Rogers Park, so where he's also been able to be a president and having someone who's a president and a Rav is a good
rabbi
thing.
And president at the same time?
Not the rabbi, but to have a rabbi as
ordained?
the president.
I have been a synagogue rabbi in Canada for 5 years.
Right, I forgot that, in London, Ontario.
And I'm now the president of a synagogue in West Rogers Park, Young Israel of West Rogers Park.
Okay.
So I've been on many sides of
Right.
the
Your
Jewish community.
position is a federation position?
JFCS.
JCFS is a federated agency, so yeah. Thank you very much, Michael.
And thank you. And David's also a great teacher of Torah, was a Wexner Fellow, graduate of Yale, all sorts of other stuff.
Thank you to Michael for the invitation to teach and to learn with you, and I appreciate the offer to teach on anything I want. So I've chosen to teach on the subject, is it a small world after all? You've seen the description that Michael sent out. So just to read it, is the world and the cosmos small and young, or large and old? We will explore the views of the earth, the cosmos, and cosmic time in Tanakh, Talmudic sources, and in the writings of Rabbi Yisrael Lipschitz, a 19th century rabbi. We will consider what it means to live in a small, young world or in a large, old one. So, of course, whether the world is small or large is not really an answer that's going to be given by the materials that we're looking at today. I'm more interested in the way Jews have thought about the world we live in, and that has changed. So we recently read in the Torah, in Parshat Va'edchanan, Ushmartem va'asitem, you shall be observe the mitzvot faithfully, kihi chachmatchem uvinatchem la'enei ha'amim, for that will be proof of your wisdom and discernment to other peoples, la'enei ha'amim, in the eyes of the nations, asher yishma'un et kol ha'chokim ha'ela, when they hear of all these laws, they will say, v'amru rak am chacham v'nabon hagoy hagadol hazeh. Surely that great nation is a wise and discerning people. The Talmud in Shabbat shares a teaching about what it might mean that the nations of the world, la'enei ha'amim, in their, literally to their eyes, would perceive the wisdom of the Jews. Rabbi Shimon bar Nachmani said that Rabbi Yochanan said, from where is it derived that it is a mitzvah incumbent upon one to calculate astronomical seasons and the movement of constellations? As it stated, and you shall guard and perform, for it is your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the nations. What wisdom and understanding is there in the Torah that is in the eyes of the nations? In other words, what is something that human beings can look at, and when they look at that thing, they'll say, oh, how wise are Bnei Israel, how wise are the Jews? So what is it that you must say this is the calculation of astronomical seasons and the movement of constellations, as the calculation of experts is witnessed by all. If we're told that there's going to be a solar eclipse next Monday and it doesn't happen, then we would say someone got there calculations off. If it happens on Monday, which we anticipate, then we would say, wow, those are some smart people. So we have a sense in the Talmud that understanding the nature of the stars, planets, constellations is part of what marks the wisdom of the Jews. In the view of these Talmudic rabbis, we as a people are supposed to be concerned about the astronomy.
What was the last word?
Astronomy, the science, of the stars. I mentioned the upcoming solar eclipse, which is puts this into a nice perspective. And I read yesterday about, this is on my mind, perhaps on your minds as well, the way in which science is perceived. One of the themes that we're going to see is that information about the world, ways of thinking about the world, are impactful to the extent that people are willing to heed them, to pay attention to them. So there's the whole field of the sociology of knowledge, how knowledge is the way information spreads is connected to what's happening in societies and among peoples. So there was an article in the New York Times, government report finds drastic impact of climate change in the U.S., and the concern of the authors, will this report be approved, be received by the president so that it can be made public? It's already been made public, but it's interesting how
because
and
they didn't trust that it would be made public. Right?
So we're going to see discussions in which one of the themes is that the Jews, to a certain extent, we have changed the way we understand the world and the cosmos we live in, and part of that change is our willingness to absorb new information. In other words, our reception. And another context for what I'm going to talk about today is that I heard Haydn's Creation yesterday at Ravinia, which is a beautiful piece of music. Okay, so the question again is...
the rabbinic statement that you just made.
Pardon me?
I want to see if we can the context of the rabbinic statement that you said about Ichochamatchem.
Yeah.
Astrology and astronomy was wisdom in the whole ancient world.
Yes.
In Greece. So, there's perhaps a concern there that this is their wisdom, but it has to be our wisdom too, because if we don't have it, then...
Oh. Well, okay.
If we're ignorant of astronomy, then they're going to consider us to be ignoramuses because this is important to them.
As opposed to saying that there's an inherent value for Jews internally to.
The question is why Dafka do they pick that? The calendar is based upon the movement of the luminaries, right? So you have to know, just for internal needs, you need to have that.
Right.
But it's also something, they lived in a Greco-Roman world where science was important.
So we're sort of keeping up with the Joneses,
to
so
make
to
sure that, you want to exceed them, because then your wisdom will shine. But if you don't have it, then you're primitive.
Thank you.
I'm just guessing.
What's interesting, I think what you're saying is that there's a concern not to look backward scientifically in contrast to the Greek or the Roman world or the Mesopotamian world. That's it's an interesting question. Thank you for raising it. So. Once again, is the world and the cosmos that we live in small and young or large and old? So we're going to consider and discuss some texts. You've all have the handouts. First of all, about the size of the cosmos. Secondly, about the age of the cosmos. And we'll reflect on what it might mean to see oneself as living in a small, young world or in a large, old one. You notice that I group together small and young and large and old because that tends to be how they're grouped together. We'll see how this plays out. But I've never heard of someone saying I live in a small old world or a large young one. They seem to be small young and large old. We'll also consider texts that describe a particular microcosm, a miniature or mini world, a place that encapsulates the created world. I will suggest some ways of understanding some of the themes and images of this microcosm that are often close to our Jewish experience to this day. At certain points, I will show you some images that clarify or illuminate some of the themes we've discussed. We're only going to be able to touch on the themes we're exploring in the time that we have this morning. So I'm not going to go in tremendous depth, but I see this as Rashi Prakim chapter headings in that one can follow up in a number of other ways. And you can see a book propping up the projector, the Natan Slifkin's The Challenge of Creation. If you're interested in a deeper dive into the way that traditionalist rabbis have responded to and wrestled with ideas about the age and size of the cosmos, there's some wonderful chapters in that book.
It seems to be a very timely topic. A congregant recently quoted one of our White House administration people saying that the world was 5,700 years old. He wasn't Jewish, and I sort of wondered where he had pulled 5,700 from.
Presumably Jewish sources. I mean, there are Christian sources which talk about a number that I've heard a number of times is younger than 10,000 years. There are in Christian sources. There are.
It was striking that it was 5,700, so I did get a phone
that
call
sounds
about
like
it, right?
that sounds
Somebody,
like
they must have picked up that number somewhere. I'd never heard that happen before.
Yeah, and we'll see where that number comes from. Okay, so one more point before we get to texts. In modern physics, time and the three dimensions of space are understood to be related. So in Hebrew, we have a term that's used to describe both time and space.
Olam.
Olam. So in modern Hebrew, olam means
World.
Everything, just universal.
Right, space. But if you look in Tanakh, I'm not sure of a single place where it's clear in Tanakh, in our Bible, that olam refers to space. We have the phrase le'olam, le'olam va'ed, or in Kaddish le'olam ulami amaya. So
it's the more or less tangible that becomes more concrete. Usually it's, I think, the opposite. The more concrete may become less tangible. But here, olam starts as more time, eternity, than actually a physical. It becomes something physical later.
It goes from from time to space, yeah. And I would say that there's a certain understanding there that time and space are related.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because of Einstein.
Well, Einstein has, yes. Einstein has given us the scientific, but there's an insight. What I'm suggesting is an insight in our tradition that time and space are related because we have the same word. I mean, in the phrase "melech haolam," I don't think that's referring to space.
Right.
I think that's referring to eternity.
There is a rabbi who does a lot of translation in the liberal Jewish world who translated, I'm going to look up because I can't remember who it is at the moment. I think it's Larry Kushner, but I don't want to be wrong. Of ruler of time and space. That's the phrase.
Oh, okay, but that's great. Beautiful.
So if you would like to know who it is,
holding both.
Says that I will
holding both. Okay. So let's focus now on small world or large. How have we thought of the cosmos? Our first central text is the first passage on page one of the handouts. And Michael, is there a tradition of folks reading around the table, or
that's up to you?
Okay, so I've given you Hebrew and English for all these things. I think I'll read it in English to save time because we've got so much to do. I don't mean to insult anyone, and I will refer to important things in the Hebrew. So we have. From Breshit chapter 1, God said, "Let there be an expanse, a rakia, in the midst of the water, that it may separate water from water." God made the expanse, and it separated the water which was below the expanse from the water which was above the expanse, and it was so. God called the expanse sky, and there was evening and there was morning, a second day. So I'm going to draw up a little picture up here, and I'm going to draw an expanse. This expanse is green. I could have chosen. All right, so I'll do something which looks more metallic, and I'll explain why. Okay, so the word is rakia. Okay, and so it comes from a shoresh, from a Hebrew root, and the root lirakea means to hammer out, as we can see from the passages from Exodus and Job. Tarkia imo lashchakim. Can you help God hammer out the heavens firm as a mirror of cast metal? According to Eov, according to the book of Job, this firmament, firmament is the old English word for it. Firmament means something hard. Okay, that's why the word firmament was used by King James translators. So in Eov, and also we can see in Shemot that rakia implies metal that has been hammered flat. Okay, so the metaphor here, or I'm not sure it's a metaphor. It's not presented as a metaphor. The image is of a dome, kipat habarzel, iron dome, a biblical iron dome that is up there, and it's separating certain things from certain other things. So what is it separating?
Water.
It's separating water. So water, where's the water?
Right.
You have water up above, and you have water.
Clouds.
You have water below.
Clouds.
Anonym, clouds. Well, it just says
Clouds
mime.
would be below, though.
By above and by, yeah.
There's water above and below this structure. That's the simple.
Well, maybe the assumption that there's water above is because otherwise how would the rain come? So there you made an assumption that the water was above. Whoever took notes assumed that rain had to come from some water source.
Okay, so in the flood story, we're told the Arubot Hashamayim Niftachu, the windows of the heaven were opened up as if there were little,
Drains or something.
drains. Okay, so that's the image, and you can see from the passage in Isaiah that God is described as Yoshev al Chuk haaretz, enthroned above the vault of the earth. So this is very anthropomorphic, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to make a little chair, okay, and I'm going to call that a kiseh, a throne. Okay, so God spreads out the heavens like in Notah, spreading out the skies. The image there is kadok, like gauze, and then things down below look like little chagavim, look like ants, like grasshoppers. Okay, so this is an image of the world, and another part of the image comes up in verses from other parts of Tanakh. In Tehillim, there's something called Mosdot Tevel. So if I have, we later get the separation of the lower water and earth. So we've got earth down here, okay, and then there are these things called Mosdot Tevel, some sort of foundations or pillars, and they're also in Eov Amudei Shamayim, the pillars of heaven. What's keeping heaven up? Some sort of pillars. That's the image that we're presented. And that happens, the sign is called Adnei Shamayim, and there's several places in Tanakh where there's references to pillars. So the image you have, a simple reading is that the Shamayim, the sky, is sort of delineated, separated from the earth by a firmament, by a rakia, separating upper water from lower water. The lower water then is separated from Yabasha, from dry land, and there are pillars that hold the whole structure up.
Atlas.
Pardon me?
Atlas.
So in Greek mythology, there's the image of someone, and the other traditions talk about either the turtle or bulls or things holding up the sky. Okay, and there's also different levels of Shamayim on page 2 at the top. Haraluhu Shemei HaShamayim V'Hamayim HaShamei HaShamayim. Praise Hashem, praise God. Heaven, the heaven of heavens, the highest heavens, and you waters that are above the heavens. So the different layers of stuff, and there are things going on in the earthly world down below, and there are things going on up above. So to us, when we read verses about the sky as if it were hammered, I mean, we have to understand this metaphorically, because we can send spaceships to the moon or wherever, and they don't seem to have to either bang into or pierce, I've never encountered Jews who seem troubled by space travel. It doesn't seem to be a theological issue.
It's the whole issue of how do you put out the filler.
Right. That's right. How you daven in space. Right. How you observe Shabbat in space, but not like, well, how is it possible?
How is it possible?
Well, it's a good question. Is like, well, how did people imagine? Where are the moon? Where is the sun in this scheme? Where do they exist? So let's take a peek at what the Rambam says, writing in the 12th century. We often think of Maimonides as being the height of, medieval science. If the Rambam says it, that must be the last word in science in his time. He couldn't have been behind the times because he was so open to ideas, and he talks about being open to reevaluating understandings of what we read of in the Torah based on science. So he's going to present to us his understanding in the 3rd chapter of the Foundations of the Torah. This is our second main text on page 2. In about a quarter of the way down. As to the orbs, galgalim, sort of spheres, things that like spheres, they're called Shamayim, heaven, Rakia, the expansion, Zavul, the habitation, and Aravot, the darkness of the ether. Now these consist of 9 orbs. The orb that is nearest to us is the orb of the moon. The reason why you see all the stars as if they were all of them in the same orb, though some among them are one above the other, is because the orbs are pure and transparent, like crystal and sapphire. Therefore, the stars which are in the 8th orb are seen beneath the 1st orb. Each one of the 8 orbs, in which are the planets, contains many more orbs, one above the other, like the skins of onions. Moreover, none of them has any empty space between them. So the image the Rambam presents is that you've got revolving spheres, and in each of them is something. Each of them contains heavenly bodies, like it says in the first parak of Breshit that God sets, Vayitain, he set the sun and moon in the sky. So for the Rambam, the sun and moon are actually embedded in their respective spheres, and they're all turning around. Okay. So
we know they're turning around because when we look at the sky, we see the constellations.
We see them moving. We see them moving from day to day, and so.
Yeah, and they come back to their same place. So
right.
Therefore, they occupy their space.
So here's an image.
What are the 9
from? Whoopsie, I went ahead myself. Did I? No. Karen did not. Pardon me.
What are the 9 orbs? You have 4 orbs listed here.
Okay, so
you have the 5 planets.
What you see now is a chart of the orbs by Bartolomeo Velho, a Portuguese astronomer, right? And who drew this in 1568, and so you can see. Here's the moon, Luna. Here's Mercury. Here is Venus. Here's the sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and here's Firmamento. What he calls firmament. Okay, and now it's also interesting the way this particular astronomer has presented the world. How do you like his world?
Well, we're the center of it.
Well, but how do you like the way he's depicted the planet Earth?
It's round.
It's like in 2.
Go round.
It's spherical. It seems to be spherical. And you've got Africa here, you've got Asia, Europe, North America. He's got a lot of information here. Pardon me?
What year is this?
1598.
Wow.
Okay, not too long before Copernicus, and were they later than that? But anyway, but so this is. The Rambam would have looked at this, and I think the Rambam would have said, "Yeah, it looks pretty good." Mm-hmm. He might have quibbled. This one actually has numbers. It's got all kinds of.
Is this a round Earth or is it 2 half flat Earths?
Yeah, there's one Earth, the one sphere of the Earth. He's showing both hemispheres.
sides.
Yeah.
I understand, but is it rounded?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he means it to be
Well,
rounded.
he's already before Copernicus, and he's talking about
So the idea that the world is a sphere. We don't have any way of knowing for sure how Jews viewed, or how the Torah describes the.
Rabbeinu Tam it's not a sphere. It's flat because the sun has to go underneath to get to the other side.
Yeah, there's good reason to believe. I mean, the presentation of the world in much of the ancient world was basically a circle, not a round plate, a flat plate with water around it. Pythagoras, or his school, going back a long way, thought of the world as a sphere, apparently not because he had proof, but because he thought that a sphere was a perfect shape. So he thought the world was perfect, and it should be he just preferred that shape. So there's evidence. Apparently, Aristotle understood the world to be a sphere, because when we have eclipses, that's a lunar eclipse, you can see the shadow of the Earth, and it's a circular. You see a curved shadow. Mm-hmm. So Aristotle determined that the Earth must be spherical based on that.
But the difference here, while the Earth is a sphere, everything revolves around the Earth.
Right.
Which is what the Rambam holds. Right. So the Rambam says in the next paragraph, this is the science of calculation of the revolutions and of the planets, astronomy we would call it. Many books were composed about these matters by Chachmei Yavan, the sages of Greece. The Rambam seems to be saying that, you want more information, go see what the Greeks wrote about this, because they wrote. He wouldn't quote something that he thought was not worth reading unless he told you don't read it. But the implication is that his knowledge is consistent, his understanding is consistent with what's been done by sages of Greece. And it's interesting if you. I think you can see this in the chart here. Okay, so on the image on the screen. I'm not sure if this is, what would you say this number is? Not so clear what that is. I mean, it's 47. I think it's meant to be 47. At any rate, the Rambam says the Earth is greater than the Moon by about 40 times, and the Sun is again greater than the Earth by about 170 times. So I looked up on the web, what does NASA have to say about this? So NASA says that the Earth is 49 times bigger than the Moon. The Rambam said 40, 49. We're pretty close. Okay, how about the Sun? So Rambam says the Sun is 170 times bigger than the Earth. NASA says it's 1.3 million times bigger than the Earth. So,
the decimal point was off.
Well, the Earth just got smaller, or the Sun got bigger. I don't mean actually bigger or smaller. I'm saying when we think about our relationship to stuff in our neighborhood, in the solar system, wow, we just got small. Things got bigger. Now, the Rambam doesn't know about the fact that we are at some small speck of the Milky Way, and the Milky Way itself is just some small part of the universe. So our understanding of what's happening in the sky got significantly bigger, and our world has gotten smaller. So, what difference does that make? What difference does that make? Do you think it makes a difference?
Well, it's 170. When the Rambam says the sun's greater than 170 times, that's still a lot.
Yeah, the sun is. Yeah.
I mean, there is something about. I mean, it's
a small world.
It's a small, even, yeah.
Yeah. So, what's the difference between 170 and 1.3 million?
Exactly. Now we know it doesn't make a difference, but what is the difference?
Right. So I've put up on the board a drawing from the year 1909. This appeared in a magazine called The White and Blue, which was a magazine put out by Brigham Young University.
Wow.
And Ralph Chamberlain wrote The Early Hebrew Conception of the Universe, and let's compare it to if we still have our drawings have disappeared. Chamberlain has the rakia, right? Mm-hmm. he has chambers in heavens, and you've got moon, stars, sun, and we talked about the amudim, or the mostot, and he describes these as far off mountains that hold up the sky. And then down below we have Tahom. We've got the deep. We've got Mayanot Tahom, the fountains of the deep, which are referred to in the flood story, and they're also Arubot HaShamayim, the windows, the portals through which water can come. And one doesn't want that to happen because when the rakia has holes in it, then bad things can happen. And now the fact is, let's go back to Bert's question about rain. So there's discussions about, almost like Gore-Tex. Maybe the firmament is like Gore-Tex, so like water can come in through little, or vapor can come in one way. At any rate, they tried to make sense of how rain works with the firmament. But this idea is, I would say the Rambam isn't too far off from this, although he doesn't talk about water above. And for him, there are a series of additional spheres. The firmament has become spheres. He doesn't talk about metal, he talks about sapphire or crystal. The image is really of something like glass. Has a physical structure, and we're not going to get into his understanding about how the different galgalim, the spheres, are actually intelligences. That's another interesting discussion. So, and we've considered the way in which the Torah describes the world, and not just in Breshit, but also in the book of Job and in Psalms and elsewhere. Okay, let's go into our next discussion, which is young or old. So our first text comes from the opening of Seder Olam Rabbah. It's on the bottom of page 2 or the top of page 3. So Seder Olam Rabbah, the great order of the world. The word Seder is another word for book sometimes. The great book about the world is from the time of the Tanaim, so around the 200s. It is attributed to Rabbi Yosef Bar Chalafta, one of the students of Rabbi Akiva, and it gives us a chronology of events in Tanakh, and takes the biblical dating not just literally, but sees it as the basis for coming up with the year 5777. Okay, where do we get that number from? We get it from this book.
Right.
Okay, it goes through all the biblical material and calculates the amount of time. And this Rashi quotes it frequently, highly revered by the Rishonim, by the early commentators of the Talmud, medieval rabbis. From Adam to the flood was 1,656 years, and this is their enumeration: Adam 130, Seth 105, Enosh 90, Canaan 70, Mahalalel 65, Jared 162, Enoch 65, Methuselah 187. Methuselah lived a long time longer, but I guess before his son Lamech was born, and then Noah was 600 years old, etc. Enoch buried Adam and lived after him 57 years. Methuselah exhausted his days just before the flood. If you're interested in the way this all works out, the Art Scroll Chumash has a table of the lives of the figures of Breshit, and you can see that
it shows the overlaps.
And Adam, he's not alive. He dies just before the flood. From the flood to the division of languages was 340 years. Noah lived 10 years after the division of languages, Dor HaPalaga. Our father Abraham was at the division of languages 48 years old. Okay, so for a long time, and that's when we say 5777, and we're proud. We have a date. Christians have their years. We have our years. Muslims have their years. Everyone has their years. We've got our years too. We've got a way of referring. We didn't always put those years into ketubot, for example. There were other years that were put into ketubot. Maybe one of us here knows more about that than I do.
According to the king, reign of a king.
From the Korban Habayit.
Minyan Shtarot, from the Greek period.
Right. So we traditionally use.
This we use now.
We use 5777, and it comes from this book, and this book is highly valued in the scene. And for many Jews, this is the last word. Okay. So for many traditional Jews, this is the last word. If you suggest something otherwise, then you are attacking the foundations of tradition and
yeah, but he comes out when you get to the destruction of the first temple, he's way off.
Okay, way off because you have another knowledge.
Because you have other sources.
Okay, so for many traditionalists, that's cool. You've got other sources, but if I have a machloket, if I have an argument between your external sources and my revered. If this is good enough for Rashi, why isn't it good enough for Bubby and Zaidi?
External sources refer to the kings that are referred to in Tanakh. You have the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, you have the reign of this one and that one, and they do not jibe with. When you get to that point, it does not jibe.
Right. So many traditions are aware of that, and.
There's a missing few hundred years. Yeah.
Okay, so there may be missing a couple of billion years. So
the big problem is when was the Exodus? The year of the Exodus. That's the first thing that really had to be settled before you can get an accurate dating.
Okay.
Otherwise, you have a variation of 200 years right in there.
Alrighty.
In the traditionalist world, when you start dating things, truth in advertising. My father was a medical school professor at Northwestern, and so and he took on the East Grand Rapids School Board about teaching creationism alongside evolutionism. So I come
I see.
Naturally.
You've got a personal interest.
Yeah, I never wanted to debate with him either. So, but I don't have any issue with saying, well, we don't know how long a day is.
Okay.
Right. Right. I mean,
in terms of the first verse, the first chapter of Breshit. Okay. Many Jews, not just traditionalists, are
Tehillim.
Comfortable.
Tehillim says, gives it 1,000 years. Elef shanim be'edach kiyom etmol.
Okay, 1,000 years is just like
yesterday.
Like yesterday. So okay.
And I think of it as just a unit of time. That's each day one, day two. I just think of it as a unit of time. I don't get caught up in
24 hours.
Yeah, it's impossible. I mean, the sun wasn't made until day 4. Yeah, I mean,
that question is an old question.
Yeah,
Jews have thought about that for centuries.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. So in recent centuries, Rabbi Israel Lipschitz his drush, his sermon called Or HaChaim, the light of life. Marked a kind of a period. It marked a turning point in which at least some traditionalist rabbis began thinking about the nature, the age of the world, in light of new findings. So the early 19th century and the whole 19th century was a time of discovering, learning about the world, learning about rocks, learning about fossils, digging things up out of the ground. And Rabbi Lipschitz was inspired by what he read about that and felt it was important enough to share with his people that he put it into a sermon. Now, the reason why this is so important is that Rabbi Lipschitz wasn't just, every rabbi is important, does important work. He was in addition to doing important communal work, he was a great commentator. His commentary on the Mishnah is called Tiferet Yisrael, the glory of Israel, and has 2 parts, which we'll come back to the names of his 2 parts, Yachin and Boaz. And at the end of the section of the Mishnah, which has his commentary, at the end of Sanhedrin, this drush, this sermon is printed. So He gave the sermon in 1842. He published it in 1845. This is before On the Origin of Species of Darwin. He's not going to talk about evolution, but let's see what he says. And as regards the past, Rabbi Abahu states at the beginning of Breshit Rabbah that the words, and it was evening and it was morning, in the apparent absence of the sun, here it says, indicate that there was a series of epochs before then. The Holy One created worlds and destroyed them, approving some and not others.
You did that. You did a whole midrash on that last year about this season.
Yeah, it was a text from, what's his name, from the Alter Slobodka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's... Okay, so we've got... Breshit Rabbah is very...
Class.
Wonderful. Breshit Rabbah is a very old text, and very revered among all the collections of Midrash, of Agadic Midrash. It has a special place. So Rabbi Abahu there conceives of a series of stages involving some sort of creation and destruction. Our first chapter of Breshit just talks about a single process of creation unfolding just according to the way God describes it. But for Rabbi Abahu, it's more complex. The Kabbalists, the mystics, expanded upon this statement and revealed that this process is repeated 7 times, each Shemitah, each sabbatical, meaning each epoch, achieving greater perfection than the last. They also tell us that we are now in the midst of the 4th of these great cycles of perfection. That sort of implies that he's anticipating some kind of cataclysm which will lead to something better. Okay. We are enabled to appreciate to the full the wonderful accuracy of our Holy Torah when we see that this secret doctrine, handed down by word of mouth for so long and revealed to us by the sages of the Kabbalah many centuries ago, has been borne out in the clearest possible way by the science of our generation. So all the discoveries of the 19th century are confirming for him what the Jews knew all along. By the way, this is a strategy that people often use, like modern science just shows that we were always right. The questing spirit of man. Now, this translation comes from, I found this on a Or Sameach site, but you can also see it discussed in Aryeh Kaplan's Immortality, Resurrection, and the Age of the Universe, a Kabbalistic View. You can tell by the title of Rabbi Kaplan's book that he and Rabbi Lipschitz are essentially on the same page. The questing spirit of man, probing and delving into the recesses of the earth, in the Pyrenees, the Carpathians, the Rocky Mountains in America, and the Himalayas, has found them to be formed of mighty layers of rock lying one upon another in amazing and chaotic formations, explicable only in terms of revolutionary transformations of the Earth's surface. Furthermore, they found in Siberia in 1807, he's so excited, under the eternal ice of those regions, permafrost, a monstrous type of elephant some 3 or 4 times larger than those found today. Similarly, fossilized remains of sea creatures have been found within the recesses of the highest mountains, and scientists have calculated that of every 78 species found on the Earth, 48 species that are no longer found in our present epoch.
Got to increase that number today.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, let me just talk about his optimism of the eternal ice of those regions.
Okay. From all this, we can see that all that the Kabbalists have told us for so many years about the repeated destruction and renewal of the earth has found clear confirmation in our time. Now, he's not talking about how old he sees the world as being, but he is describing a series of ages. So even if he thinks that the age we live in is 5,776, he imagines that the previous ages, which don't trouble, he's not troubled by the fact, he's not trying to reconcile this with Seder Olam Rabbah. I guess he would say, well, you know what? Seder Olam Rabbah is talking about our epoch. And that epoch is, he's not talking about evolutionary change, he's not talking about one species moving into another, but he imagines the world is older than Seder Olam Rabbah describes it. And if you want another approach, so scientists speak about a Big Bang. I'm not sure what traditionalists think about the Big Bang, because being interested personally in the Zohar, the Zohar describes processes which seem sort of like Big Bangs. But Rabbi Kaplan, Arya Kaplan says that 5,776 means 5,776 divine years, and each year or each day is 3 times 356 times 1,000. He somehow manages to get from 5,776 to about 13 billion, and he's happy. He says, "You see, all that scientists can do is reveal what we knew all along." But we didn't know that.
But we didn't know that until science revealed it.
Okay, so there are efforts, and there are efforts to reconcile, and I would say Gegus and Tahate, by all means. The long and short is that for those of us who get our information from things like, who see certain newspapers as essentially giving us good facts. Good news, and if we want to know about the world, we'll look things up in Wikipedia. We'll see stuff that isn't agreeing with the number 5,776, and for most of us in the world, in the Jewish world, we're not troubled by that. We somehow set aside what we know about geology, or maybe even about, I'm not talking about evolution today, biology. And we keep on referring to 5,777 because it connects us.
Our tradition.
It connects us with the tradition. It connects us with the whole of Tanakh. Now, but there are certainly rabbis who say not only is 13 billion terrible, and not only can you not rely on science, but even this document is beyond the pale. Mm-hmm. Arya Kaplan describes how for some Hasidic communities they will not read Rabbi Lifshitz's commentary in the Mishnah because he's not kosher. And how do you know he's not kosher? Because he wrote this.
Yes, he wrote that.
Others say, it's true he wrote this, but he didn't actually believe it. He wrote it, but he didn't actually believe it. So that's a way of sort of saying, I want the commentary. I don't like the drush, so I'll tease apart the drush from the commentary. At any rate, I'm curious. What does it mean to see ourselves living in a world that's young and small, or large and old? Any thoughts?
Well,
what difference does it make?
I'm a rabbinic student for ordination this fall, but have studied the Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism. And Arya Kaplan is one of my favorite authors, among others. Gershom Scholem, classic. And what I appreciate about it all is the Kabbalah gives us an explanation as to what happened before there was a scientific explanation of the singularity that occurred when things kind of compressed according to the scientific explanation, and then exploded outward and expanded the physical universe. And Kabbalah said that wisdom was there in the alphabet and the Hebrew letters, and was there before, and that there was divine desire, and the whole the broken shard pieces that fell away from the divine desire that created the physicality that we are accustomed to today. So for me, the Kabbalah gives me the explanation of that which is not explainable, which you can't rationalize, but yet you experience it just as tangibly as something physical. So when I read Bereshit, I don't take it literally. It's a story, but then there's a commonality. There's something that all people in all religions have. That there's a source and a beginning.
I see. I see. Thank you. But a lot of what you say is meaningful to me personally in terms of trying to make sense of.
Yes, trying to make sense of it. That's my.
I certainly agree with you that Kabbalah opens up ways of understanding the world, the origins of the world, in ways that
science can't explain.
Well, I think it's also possible to allow you to be a scientist and to live in this sort of state of wonder.
It doesn't clash for me.
What does it? I'm just wondering, for the experience of our ancestors who did understand the world to be small and young, what difference does that make in their understanding themselves as Jews or as people? How has because it has changed.
No, what do you mean it has changed?
What
How we
the
view
consciousness
ourselves as
of being
much
a person
older.
or being a Jew, or being a human being in a world which is thousands of years old and pretty small, with the Earth at the center, is different from being in a cosmos that is billions of years
But
old.
You haven't thought about it.
With the Earth at
we
the edge.
understand today that the cosmos is tremendous and the world is very old. But in our day-to-day lives, we don't think of it that way. We still think of ourselves as being at the center of everything.
So
Yeah.
Well,
even if
it's
we've
true.
given up
Yeah.
the geocentric universe,
Yes, but psychologically we don't.
we're still there. We're
We're
still
there.
in a small young
Yeah.
world.
And if it's only 5,700 years old, then
With human beings at the center of it.
What's your thought?
the human beings at the center of it, even each of us individually is at the center of it and connected closer to that origin than if it's billions of years old. I think it's the connectivity piece.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's I think if you take the old lens, then there is. But I think I'll say it as a danger, but there can be a sense. So, do I really matter? In other words, if I take a younger sense, and we talk about Mashiach, this and that. I mean, the sense that this is all really a rather short enterprise.
Yes.
And the impact that I have can be potentially tremendous.
Yes.
If you've taken the totality of all of this in the larger lens, this is so, we'll be dead. Anybody's going to remember us?
Which is a footnote.
What?
We're the period at the end of a footnote.
Yeah, the period. If we're lucky, we're of something at the end of a footnote. And then we have to, then how do we make sense of that? The answer is you can also ignore that feeling and just, live as you're supposed to live as if this is a very young world and we're really important. Or if we're, if it's an older world, less important, then let's try to. Maybe we pay so much attention to personal insult, national insult, and it's silly. So I guess is there a certain morale? I guess my question is as follows: is there what is the morality that emerges out of whether it's a young world or an old world? Do I have a different sense
the
of
larger and small
morality?
that's more important than the young.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think it's both, but is there a morality about what does this command me to do? How does this command me to live? Or on the other hand, you can say it doesn't matter. I mean, someone's in pain, someone's in pain, and so helping someone maybe in the immediacy of the moment, whether or not long term it means anything, is irrelevant because you've helped someone in crisis at the moment. So those are my very scattered thoughts.
Thank you.
Completely scattered.
So,
On the other hand, when we contemplate the enormity of the world, the age of the world, it stimulates that sense of the Hegelian sense of awe and
Wonder.
Yeah.
Ma'anoshki.
It makes us feel insignificant.
Who is
on the
man?
one
Why
hand.
have you? Why has God noticed
right.
man? We're standing at the Grand Canyon and saying, "Oh, how awesome!"
yeah.
is
Right.
the world."
yeah.
Right. So I'm struck by the fact that it seems to me that traditionalists are not so bothered by the fact that the cosmos has gotten real big. That doesn't seem to bother people. I am I've for a long time found it really interesting that the Torah Masorah, the Organization of Orthodox Schools, has in its emblem, in its logo, some planets, which is sort of remarkable. So I think it has Saturn with the rings of Saturn. You could look it up.
Really?
And the Aguda, their emblem has the Earth as a sphere. Like, wow, they're okay with the Earth being a sphere. So at any rate, it seems to be that in terms of size and shape, we're not so troubled. I mean, I think there still are traditionalists who say, the Earth is the center, and the model of it's not a solar system, it's an earthly system, is that the other heavenly bodies are moving around us, and they also have weird kind of, in their different orbs, they swivel around in unusual ways, except the sun is pretty constant. So, and the moon is pretty constant. So, I mean, there are people who say we have to maintain the geocentric model because that's what our ancestors thought. The Rambam thinks that we have to. That's what the Talmud says. We have to accept that. But even though the Tanakh says a lot more about the structure of the cosmos than it does about dating.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot. The references to the Rakia is all over the place, and Chug HaShamayim, and the dome of heaven, and the Amudim, and the Mostot, and the Adanim that are holding the whole structure up. Mm-hmm. Those don't seem to be, to my mind, presented as metaphors. We take that metaphorically and we're okay with that. So it could be that the reason why traditions are, as far as I understand, more comfortable with a big cosmos than with an old cosmos is because there aren't, we don't have numbers indicating the size of the cosmos, but we have numbers indicating years. So even though I would argue that the Tanakh is not generally, it doesn't seem that interested in how much time has elapsed totally, but the fact that Seder Olam Haba has put together this list and given us 5,777 becomes for many traditionalists a sort of do or die or a assertion for which there's no compromise can be had. You have to maintain that line in the sand. I remember speaking with a friend who I met at Yeshiva University when I was in Smicha there in rabbinical school, and I said something about the Big Bang or the billions of years old. And he said, "You can't say that unless you have a very, very long beard." He was a law student at NYU. I thought, really, I didn't realize. He felt that you can't compromise with 5,700. And at any rate, so that there is.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this for a long, long time, but I don't usually get to think about it in this kind of pluralistic Jewish world. Michael, what are you thinking? Because I've never 5778.
And Michael's one of us.
Michael's one of us. Is that
Michael. In that sense,
and Michael, I don't want to put you on the spot either.
You're not putting me on the spot at all.
Okay.
You're not putting me on the spot at all. I think. By the way, particularly in light of what David's been doing this morning so far, I think the years issue I couldn't care less about. The structure of the universe issue is, I think, maybe a more of a challenge, but for me, let me put it this way. The old story.
I'm not quoting you.
No, you can quote me all you want. The old story, which means I heard it once, of the guy who comes back to his shtetl after going away, in the 1800s, a scholar going away to study and go to university, or he goes to Berlin, whatever, and he comes back to visit the shtetl to see his family. And his father asks, "What have you learned?" And he goes through this whole long description of everything he's learned, all this enlightenment stuff, etc. And then the father says, "Oh, very good." Looks at his watch, says, "Oh, time getting close to Shkia. Let's go to shul to daven mincha." And the kid looks up and says, "Haven't you heard a word I've been telling you?" And the father says, sure, I took it very seriously, but what does it have to do with davening mincha? And in that sense, halacha, how much of halacha is affected by a biblical conception of the world?
I think that people who are holding on most ardently, most firmly to a small young world, perhaps feel that they themselves would not be able to sustain their commitments if they thought about the world in other ways. So folks who've already made that adjustment can daven mincha, but they might say they might not be able to wrap their mind around that. At any rate, another point is that if the world is very young, 5,770, that means that Adam was around for like a sixth of human history, and the giving of the Torah. The Torah has been around for more than half of the history of the world. That's a really important document. Like, we're really at the center of everything. We're at the center of the. But if it turns out that planet Earth is a young planet, 4.5 billion years old, however old planet Earth is, like, whoa, like the Torah has only been around for like less than a thousandth or 10,000, of a percent. Like, it seems like we're sort of like icing on the cake. So we've been removed from the center of the human, and we could view it that way. I mean, it's possible, as I said, as we all realize, it's possible to think more broadly about it.
The thing with the whole purpose of a date is to give you a point of reference, basically for civil law, in terms of who has first call on who has the first mortgage on the piece of property, whatever. So the dating of 57, 77 is not that old. So maybe 1,500 years old? Because or 2,000 maybe, but certainly not
2,000, yeah.
Because you use from roughly 300 through the time of the Maccabees, you use Minyan Shtarot, you use the according to the reign of the Ptolemies in Egypt. It's. I don't think the date is a halachic issue. I don't think the date is a religious issue. The date is a maybe you can even call it a legal fiction in order to determine what took place when and what has precedence and what is first claimed or whatever.
No, but it's become more than that. I mean, you can go this discussion. The accepting that date is an affirmation of the literal truth of Torah.
But that means before the Ptolemies, there was they didn't have dating.
No,
they dated according to the king.
But they didn't try to make the date for creation.
It was not religious.
It's not clear to me that we have evidence before Seder Olam Haba that someone had sat down to add up all the dates. It could be that the Torah itself, when you follow and see that Adam lives to just before the flood.
Right.
That sounds like that dating.
Right.
The dating.
They're dating something.
It indicates that the flood is a new epoch. You've got the first 10 generations, and that's remarkable that it works out the way.
You can date from the first year of Netanyahu. It's unreasonable.
Yeah, but look at all the contortions that say Christian fundamentalists go through when you ask them about the dinosaurs and stuff like that. When they try to affirm the youth of the universe,
right,
as is found in the Bible,
and
they'll say that God created fossils.
You don't have to go to
sort
the
of
dinosaurs.
to fool us.
The Lubavitcher Rebbe said some similar things. Okay, please. I've forgotten your name. I'm sorry. Margaret.
And I don't know. I'm thinking, which is a good thing, but in the last reform movement, Machzor, Gates of Repentance, the rabbi actually stood there and proclaimed the new year on Erev Rosh Hashanah in Hebrew and English. I don't know if it's in the new one because there's a new version, and I don't think it's in Siddur. It's not in Harlem. Right? No. But what does it mean for a rabbi to stand there? Because I took it over to the congregation in Elgin because I thought that was halachic actually, and actually proclaimed that it'll be 5778.
as if you were actually triggering the.
Right.
That's interesting. Okay. All right.
For me, it was always metaphor. But
That's
light of
the
this.
1 month of the year where we don't have Birkat HaChodesh.
Right.
We don't have Rosh Chodesh Bench.
Right.
It's for Tishrei.
Right.
Okay.
Because it
So,
sneaks in by Kesef.
folks, I want to give us back our small universe, if not a young one. I mentioned that there's a way in which we are able to hang on to a kind of experience, like a microcosm. There's a respect in which all Jews have thought of and continue to think of the world as a small place, and that is in the small world known as Mishkan, or Mikdash, or synagogue, which as a Mikdash Me'at is a kind of microcosm, a mini world. So our first text for this comes from Midrash Shmot Rabbah, Exodus Rabbah, on page 4 at the bottom. Another word. You shall make planks for the tabernacle. That's from Exodus. Said Rabbi Avin, thus said the Holy One, blessed be he, to Moses. See and make. Moses said to him, Sovereign of the world, am I God that I can make these? So Moses is shown stuff. He's given he's shown images when he's up on a mountain, and he says, how can I possibly make these heavenly things? God said, according to their pattern, ketavni tam, with blue and purple and crimson. Just take some threads and do it that way. Just as you see above, so make below. As it is said, you shall make the planks for the tabernacle of acacia wood standing, as set in the forces above. If you will make a copy of what is above below, I will leave the counsel above and make my presence among you below. Just as above, Seraphim Omdim, seraphs stood, so below acacia wood standing. So the boards of, I'd say, Shittim Omdim in the tabernacle are imagined by Rabbi Abin as representing an angelic gathering. So when the Kohanim, the priests, stand in the Mishkan, in the tent, in the Ohel Moed, they are in the presence of the divine council with angelic beings all around them. Just as above there are stars, so below. So said Rabbi Chia bar Abba, this teaches of the golden clasps, the krasim, visible in the tabernacle were like the stars visible in the firmament. So in the imagination of these rabbis, the Mishkan is a kind of mini world, a mini divine world, actually. Okay, so the ground level would be like the earth, and then, or perhaps it's all actually. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's actually all heavenly. At any rate, so it's interesting to see this. I haven't seen this discussed in commentaries, but if you look at the last chapters of Shmot, the last chapters of Exodus describing Hakamat HaMishkan, the erection of the Mishkan, it takes place in 7 stages, and at the end of that process, Moshe sees that all that's been done, the same verb like vayechulu or vayechal shows up, and just as in Reshit, God blesses the world after creating it, so in Shmot, Moshe blesses the people, blesses the whole process. And just as creation begins, the first chapter of Reshit begins at the beginning of biblical time, so the Hakamat HaMishkan, the erection of the Mishkan, takes place at the first day of the month of Nisan, which is a New Year's Day, and according to one of the views of the Tanaim, that is actually the beginning of the creation was the first of the month of Nisan. So there's sort of connections between the Mishkan and a remaking of the the world. Okay, so in what ways is the Mishkan or the Mikdash a small world, and how is that microcosmic quality, that quality of being a small world, expressed in our own Batei Knesset, in our own synagogue? So I would like to focus on 2 in the time that we've got. We can go till when, Michael? Till
12.
Okay. So on 2 features of the Mishkan or of the Mikdash: cherubim, kruvim, and columns. Okay. So the next portion is going to be somewhat art historical.
Okay.
Even though the
I
verses.
missed the third word. Cherubim, and columns?
Columns.
Like columns.
Yeah.
Amudim,
Like
columns.
Greek columns. Okay.
No, like Jewish columns.
Oh, columns.
Yeah.
We have Jewish
I was
columns. Come
making sure I
on.
had the word right. That's all. It was an English word.
My wife, she complains to me.
Okay.
Jewish column.
All right. So now, what do we know about cherubim? About kruvim? So what are kruvim? What do they look like, and where do you find them?
Usually they
Winged
look like
things.
they're represented as children.
Children with
Wings.
wings, and they're on the Aron. They are in the ark in
Yeah.
the Mishkan or in
the Holy of
in
Holies,
the Holy of
right?
Holies.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, do we have any other cherubim hanging around
And paintings.
and painting? Those weren't done by Jews.
Okay,
typically.
all right.
Aren't they
This is
also
true.
on
And there's Chagall having people with wings.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to see that there are more kruvim. That there are lots and lots and lots of kruvim.
You mean
Aren't
from the
they on
Kabbalistic
corners of
perspective?
the thing that
No.
you carry,
Oh,
the
okay.
luach in?
The
I-
luchot were in the Aron with.
Aren't there
had
four,
kruvim
one on
down.
each of the corners?
No.
There were
There's
two on
two
top
on the cover.
on the
On the
kapora.
cover, okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So
I'm going to buy that book.
in Exodus 26, as for the tabernacle, make it of 10 strips of. This is on page 5. Make it of 10 strips of cloth. Make these of fine twisted linen of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, with a design of kruvim worked into them. Okay, so some of the tapestries on the tent, on the ohel, the Mishkan, had kruvim design. What were those? Were there little children with wings? And Rashi says there that kruvim were a lion on one side and an eagle on the other side. So we just said that kruvim are little kids. According to Rashi, quoting the Jerusalem Talmud, the Yerushalmi, they lions and eagles. Where do you get that from? Or where did the Talmud get that from? Exodus 26, you shall make a curtain, okay, what we call parochet, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen. It shall have a design of kruvim worked into it. Apparently, the sha'ar, the entrance to the chatzer, to the courtyard around the tent, according to the Talmud, also has kruvim on it. And what are those? Okay. Kings, the book of Malachim, where we read about the construction of the first Beit HaMikdash. The structure of the laver stands was as follows. They had insets, and there were insets within the frames, and on the insets within the frames were lions, oxen, and kruvim.
Wow.
Oh, but what are these kruvim? I mean, Rashi just said that the kruvim could be lions and lions and eagles, and now this passage from the book of Kings says kruvim are something other than lions and oxen. Above the frames was a stand, and both above and below the lions and the oxen were spirals of hammered metal. So we have, it's interesting discussion. To what extent does the Jewish tradition smile upon sculptured representations of things in the natural world? Well, generally doesn't.
What was
Seems
the
like
verb
it-
did you use? What word did you say? What you said a verb? I couldn't get.
Smile?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So when you particularly look at the Beit HaMikdash of King Solomon, there's a lot of sculpted stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sculpted stuff. Okay. And the most famous single description of kruvim comes from the book of Ezekiel, Yechezkel. So this is now page 6. And this is from the vision of Yechezkel. Yechezkel starts us right out with a very dramatic vision, which is quite anthropomorphic.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to...
It's cheaper than it used to be.
I want to go back to our... so in the center of it, what he's seeing were also the figures of 4 creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the figures of human beings, meaning the bodies of human beings. However, each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Mm-hmm. So imagine a body of a human being with 4 faces and 4 wings. Each of them had a human face at the front. Each of the 4 had the face of a lion on the right. Each of the 4 had the face of an ox on the left, and each of them had the face of an eagle at the back. What are these things? Above the heads of the creatures was a form, an expanse, a rakia, with an awe-inspiring gleam as of crystal, was spread out above their heads. Above the expanse over their heads was a semblance of a throne, in appearance like sapphire. And on top, upon this semblance of a throne, there was the semblance of a human form. All right, now he's very, very careful. He clothes these images in metaphoric language. So he says, "Demut, likeness, kimar'e, like the appearance of Adam." So he's describing something which is anthropomorphic, and he's talking about God. He's talking about an experience of the presence of God while he is with the exiled community from Jerusalem in Babylonia. He is a Kohen. He was, I don't know if he had experience in the Beit HaMikdash, but as a Kohen he had presumably had the right to be in the Beit HaMikdash. And he's describing something which is connected to what he might have seen in the Beit HaMikdash, appearing to him in Al Admat Nechar, on foreign land. So although the community is separated from the land, he's asserting the presence of God in their midst. Okay, it's one of the most typically Nevuah takes place either within the confines of Eretz Yisrael or Sinai, on your way to Eretz Yisrael. Yechezkel has an experience which is in exile where he doesn't.
What years?
And I don't. And he begins prophesying before the destruction, because I think he's part of the first crew. Was it like 596 before the Common Era? Something like that. I don't know exactly when this was.
That's fine.
But around this, I think it's before the destruction, because although it seems to be imminent. So you've got an image of Kruvim down here, Kruvim. And the Kruvim have 4 faces and wings, and they also have human hands, and he describes also the feet of oxen. And then there's a rakia. So what is he seeing? So I'm suggesting he's seeing something like either a kind of prophetic portable mikdash, temple, / he's seeing the cosmos. And it has the rakia, and on top he sees a throne, and he's this theophany, the appearance of God. So that's chapter 1. He doesn't say that these things are kruvim, but look at chapter 10. I looked, and on the expanse over the heads of the kruvim, he describes the same thing, and now he calls them kruvim. There was something like a sapphire stone, an appearance resembling a throne could be seen over them. Each one had 4 faces. Now he says something different. One was a keruv's face, a cherub's face, the second a human face, the third a lion's face, and the fourth an eagle's face. So what previously he had referred to as the face of an ox, now he calls the face of a keruv. Now that could mean that keruv could be an ox. The commentators say he prayed that the ox, which is a reminder of the sin of the golden calf, would turn into a keruv, the face of a young child, so that the keruvim were somehow was redeemed and turned into there was a tikkun in the keruvim to go from ox to little.
But you just used the phrase keruv, the face of a young child. Is that where we get that image then of the keruvim being? So the original source of the keruvim being like children is from a play on words. Ravya in Aramaic means child. Ravya means like a child. So keruv was understood as a kind of. But we see that in the later artwork, right?
In artwork.
So it's actually found in Jewish sources that a keruv is like a young child?
Ravya, yeah. But the Christian iconography, Christian painting gets it from us. Yay us. We had it first.
When you say like a young child, you're referring to the innocence, correct?
Or literally, the cherubim actually looked like little kids. Maybe a male one and a female, all kinds of things. Okay. At any rate, so there's more about keruvim too. By the way, we talked about the creation story. The first time we see keruvim are guarding the entrance to the garden with their cherub hamitapechet, their flashing swords. There they sound like rather scary. And guarding the door, they have a kind of police function or militia function, and they're there to keep human beings from trying to get back into the Garden of Eden. So they're scary, perhaps violent, powerful.
Maybe it's like some other words, where you have a generic term, where kruv would be another name for a malach, and then you have a specific kruv that refers to a childlike figure. There are other words like that. I can't think of any right off. Where you have one of them is the same word can be all inclusive or specific.
A genus and then a species.
Right.
So kruv could be the or
could be both.
The child kind, and then regular kruv could be multiple.
Malach.
Right. So I would suggest that kruvim, wherever they appear, have certain. I would argue against what you're saying. That kruvim, wherever they appear, suggest protection and warding off bad things, and also marking something important. You see a kruv where there's something important. In the presence of the kruv is there a sentinel, is there where there is something important. It's protecting the Garden of Eden from encroachments by the banished Adam and Chava. They can't get back in. Right. It's a special place. They could strive to get back in there, but they don't have the right to get there. And when it comes to the Mishkan or the Mikdash, I mean, coming in there, you're passing by the presence of kruvim who are there to protect and to demarcate something very holy.
Would a childlike figure represent protection?
Well, I would suggest that within the Tanakh there's no idea that the kruvim are childlike, and I don't think there's any sense at all. I don't. But I want to show you some kruvim.
What's the difference between the kruv and the face?
So I mean, I think the simplest way to take it is just that what he previously referred to as shore, he refers to as kruv now.
No, but in Yechezkel 10, he says you have kruvim,
and one was the face of a kruv,
and a human face. So if the kruv is not a child, what is the difference between those two?
It could be. Previously, he said panei shore. Why couldn't it be those?
No. But in 10.
Yeah, I see.
So there's 4 different kinds, right?
There are 4 different kinds.
Human,
in chapter 1, he has 4 different kinds. One of them is an ox. In chapter 10, he has 4 different kinds. One of them, he no longer refers to ox, he refers to kruv. So I'm suggesting
he also has a human face. So what is the difference between the kruv and the human face if the kruv is not a child?
He's saying the kruv may be an ox.
Ox. I think that's a simple sense.
Pardon?
An ox.
Refers to
the kruv is the ox again?
Yeah, that's what I think that's the simplest thing. Okay.
But
now,
the kruv is clearly separate from a human. Otherwise, it would say there are
the
2
kruv
human
could have
faces.
a human face, or I would say this: the kruvim can have different faces, and they always have wings, and they always suggest some kind of power and motion also.
So therefore, it's a generic term.
It's a generic term, but it always functions. Well, let's see how it functions. We've seen it functioning in the Garden of Eden as it has a sword in its hand. It's powerful, and I'm saying that we see them in the presence of something special or holy. In a Mishkan or Mikdash, they're there. In Yechezkel's vision, they're there underneath the throne. They're carrying the throne. They're a kind of, to use the Hebrew term, the traditional term Merkava, which actually comes from, as we'll see in the Book of Chronicles, Merkava mysticism. Where does that come from? It comes from the first chapter of Yechezkel. So
I would just add one caveat.
Yeah.
In the Garden of Eden, they're not protecting the Garden of Eden; they're protecting the Eitz HaChaim. They're preventing it from getting to the Eitz HaChaim.
Yeah, but you can't get into the garden, and you can't get to the tree. I mean,
but the emphasis is lishmor et derech Eitz HaChaim.
To guard the path to the right. Now it's interesting that in our tradition we want to get back to the Eitz HaChaim through Torah.
Right, which is also in that container that the kruvim are over. Right.
So the kruvim are there. Okay.
Right.
So perhaps
that fits in with their symbolic sense.
Margaret.
I want to write to Nehemiah Poland when we're done with this, because Nehemiah has this whole thing about how the whole Mishkan is built as a sort of a reset button to return not to the Garden of Eden but to Sinai.
There are various.
Right.
It's the Ramban.
There are various ways of understanding.
I can only cite who I learned it from, though.
That's great.
But
go look up the Ramban.
Okay, I'll go look up the Ramban. I'm happy to do that. But maybe it's to return to the Garden of Eden.
Sure.
If all the cheruvim show up at all those places again.
Right. It's sure. It's. I don't know if it's ever referred to as Eden or Garden of Eden. I don't know, but it's sometimes referred to as a forest, Ya'ar HaLevanon. The phrase, the Lebanon forest, is taken midrashically as a reference to the Tzadik Katamar Yehoah Ke'erez Balevanon Yizkeh. So Lebanon there is understood in the midrash not to refer to Lebanon, but refer to the Beit HaMikdash, which is referred to as Lebanon. So in Tehillim, Vayarkav al Keruv Vaya'of Vayeda al Kanfei Ruach. He, God, mounted a Keruv and flew, gliding on the wings of the wind. So the Keruvim are described in Yechezkel, and you see also in Tehillim, as a kind of vehicle, or to use the generic term from Greek or Roman mythology, Pegasus. That's a horse. We don't have horses here. We have other animals. But something winged, and then a throne, a moving throne. And in Tehillim, in Divrei Hayamim, the weight of refined gold for the incense altar and the gold for the figure of the chariot, HaMerkava, HaKeruvim, the cherubs, those with outspread wings, screening the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. So according to this is Pshat. This is like what it says right there in the book of Divrei Hayamim Chronicles. The Ark is a chariot. It's a chariot. It's a Merkava, and it's a chariot, and there's a chariot. I'm saying these are all associated. And you've got Kruvim, and they have wings. What do you do with wings? You move around. That's what wings are for. They let you move around. The Mishkan itself moves around, right? So there's a kind of movable throne, and somehow. And so I'm suggesting, I'll tell you why I'm saying so much about the Kruvim and what's it connected to a small world in a moment. But one more element, and then we'll see some pictures, and then we'll wrap up by noon. And I get very excited about these pictures. Columns. So when we think about columns, typically we think about some Greek temple or some Roman temple, something from
holding something up, being tall,
strong. But we have columns too. There are absolutely 0 columns in the Mishkan. But that didn't stop our great king Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon. Solomon set up the columns at the portico, Ulam, of the great hall, Heichal. He set up one column on the right and named it Yachin. And he set up one column on the left and he named it Boaz. So who thought up these? This is the temple. This is the Beit HaMikdash. Shlomo says, I'm going to put some columns in there. He puts columns in the Beit HaMikdash. He gives them names. We don't know what they mean. I mean, Boaz has something to do with strength, and Yachin has something to do with being firm, and you can see what Radak says about this. It's beautiful. But the fact is that when you approach the Beit HaMikdash of King Solomon, you would see two columns, and they're described in great detail about the capitals, and they've got meshwork, and they've got rimanim, pomegranates, and what are they doing there? And why did he put them there? Well, I don't know what they're doing there, but I think that they same frame the entrance, and anyway, he's got columns.
Right.
So let's see some pictures, and let's see what this has to do with us, and let's see what it has to do with. As I said, this next part is sort of art historical. So good. No? Okay. So I'm going to show you stuff.
Of Israeli Lifshitz's commentary on the Mishnah.
Yachin and Boaz. Yeah, he uses the same, right. Right. But when he did that, he's saying that my commentary is somehow a temple, right. a literary heichal. So what you see up here is the great lion gate of the Bronze Age citadel of Mycenae in southern Greece. Okay, so when we think about the Greeks, we think about democracy in Athens, we think about the Parthenon, we think about the Acropolis in Athens. When the Parthenon was going up in Athens, this structure was ancient. Plato and Aristotle and Socrates would have thought of this structure as being ancient. They had ancient history, and this was part of it. It was Greek, and they revered this place, and they thought it was full of meaning. And this is in subsequent centuries, I guess it got covered up and then dug up in the 19th century. And you have a depiction of lions or lionesses. We're not sure if they're lions or lionesses. And a pillar. No one quite knows what the pillar signifies, This is over a gate into the Acropolis, okay? So I'm going to suggest that those lions are related not in terms of influencing or influenced by, but association with our Kruvim. We know that Kruvim can look like lions. Mm-hmm. And these lions, I'm going to suggest, are telling you symbolically that you're about to go into a very special place, and these lions are protecting. Mm-hmm. They're not literally protecting, but they indicate that this is a protected special place. And the pillar, I don't know what the pillar is for. It's interesting. Greek pillars later are taper up to the top. This one is tapering towards the bottom. Mm-hmm. So initially, I think their pillars did that. They changed it later. But that the pillar, I would suggest, implies strength, permanence, right? A dependability. Okay. So I also want you to notice here this triangular thing here. Okay. All right. That shape. Let's go into our next. Here is a typical Doric temple, the Temple of Apphia on Aegina, and this is a model that's in a museum in Munich in Germany. The temple was built around 500 before the Common Era, and we see pillars, right? Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to make an assertion, and this is I haven't seen this anywhere, but it seems to me useful. So we've got pillars, lots of them. And we have something at the top called a tympanum or a pediment, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, many Greek temples had that element. So you've got a triangular structure at the top supported by pillars. I've focused on the pillars at the corners, but there are obviously more pillars than that. What do you see in that scene at the top?
Warriors.
See, warriors, like... Okay, so it's a depiction of some kind of struggle. So regularly in Greek temples, you would have in the sculpture, the figures at the top, you would have reference to the divine realm.
At the very, very, very top?
No, I mean like these figures. But this would be whichever goddess, goddess or god is the main ones. And these guys who have been defeated have been defeated by the power of the central figure and her. Like, it looks like a woman. Female figure there, her attendants. Okay, so you have dramas of the divine realm happening at the top of a Greek temple regularly. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to suggest that there is a link. There is a kind of not by influence, but there's an association. There's between our rakia and then the divine realm of angels and so forth, which is described a lot in rabbinic literature, but also in Tanakh, and the rakia and the columns of the earth. So I think what my suggestion here is, this my own hypothesis, is that what this Greek temple represents is a microcosm. Mm-hmm. That temple, the front of the temple, represents a representation of the cosmos, with the divine realm at the top. And the pillars represent the structure of permanence of the pillars, whatever it is that's holding up the world and holding up the cosmos.
And then what are the fallen images?
Well, those would be enemies who've been defeated by the grace of whichever divinity is there.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it. Okay.
All right. So closer to us and closer to King Solomon is the temple of Ein Dara, northwest of Aleppo in Syria. Northwestern Syria, close to, I don't know what the state of this is today, but that's been around for a long time. So that was built around 1300 before the Common Era. Okay, and the temple was in working order and hadn't changed too much until 740 before the Common Era. So when Shlomo HaMelech was getting supplies and workmen from the north to build his temple, this was an active structure. Now look at the bottom area here. Okay, what do you see at the bottom? What is this?
Is that a bull?
What are these guys?
All those winged
entities.
Okay, so
The ones in the middle look almost like the oxen that are holding up the yam.
Yeah, so the Yam Shel Shlomo, the laver that King Solomon made in the Beit HaMikdash had oxen around it. Over here, I think you've got oxen with wings. Here, I think you've got lions, and you've got wings here. These are kruvim. Okay, so they have a nice Akkadian name. Okay, Karibu. Right? They're called other things too. Sometimes they're called Shadu, which sounds like the rabbinic shade, meaning demon. Demon doesn't necessarily mean bad. And or Lamasu. At any rate, we have in the neighborhood of King Solomon, functioning, active, a temple that's been that is in working order, sort of unchanged for 600 years, with lots of stuff that has parallels with what we know of from the book of Ezekiel and from our Mishkan.
Oh, well, that kind of makes sense now that I'm thinking about it, because, he married he had so many wives, and they all brought in their practices, and so it would not necessarily, it wouldn't be unusual to see other temples and...
whatever. I'm not saying that he was influenced by this, but I'm saying it's part of a common.
Okay.
But I would even take it further. I would say, look, the Chinese often had symbolic lions, right? They don't look very, very naturalistic to me. They represent power, right? Does that mean that the Chinese were influenced by someone?
I think lions are the king of the beasts, right?
Right. Okay, so here we have something closer. I mean, it's closer to us.
What's interesting is the accent.
Yeah. All right.
They would choose accent.
It gets better. It gets better. It gets better. Okay, Margaret, you want to share a thought?
No. Bye.
Okay. Oh, these guys are amazing. Now these are Lamasa. These are in the Louvre. So these come from
Syria.
These come from I don't know exactly where in Mesopotamia. These are out east. To my mind, this is a lot more sophisticated.
I think that stuff was Assyrian.
Assyrian, right?
There's stuff similar like that in the Oriental Institute.
Yes. Yeah, they're in the Oriental Institute. They're all over the place. These are quite common. You would find them in their place of origin, at the entrance to a palace district or a temple. Okay, so what can you see about these guys? Tell us, what are they?
Looks like a horse with a face.
Well, horses do not have split hooves.
So is it an ox? Or
Oxen. Those are oxen.
With human faces?
With human faces. You can see they've got two sets of horns, nice big beards, and it's not so easy to see from
Where are the horns?
Coming up by the crowns.
Yep, underneath the crowns.
Here. And those are horns there. And then it's not so visible from this particular picture, but over here we have wings. Okay, those are winged oxen with
human faces.
Now, according to Yechezkel, his kruvim have the feet of oxen, and they might have, one of their faces is a human face, and they have wings, and they could be a bull, right? Isn't this amazing? And what are they doing here? They're telling you they suggest power. They suggest they're guarding. They're sentinels. They're guarding a sacred place. Now, obviously, no one thought that bit of stone, no matter how big, is going to keep intruders out. But it meant that the place is guarded by actual human beings, right? And it's telling you that something very important is behind there. Okay. So here is a picture, a drawing which I found on Wikipedia of Yachin and Boaz. We know very little about Yachin and Boaz. I could find very, very little about them. But I would suggest that there is a parallel between Yachin and Boaz and an association, okay, with Yachin and Boaz and what you might see in the temple of Mycenae or in the Greek temples. I think that Shlomo Melech is creating a kind of structure of the cosmos here.
Oh.
Okay. All right. At any rate, what does this have to do with us? Okay. So where do we have any? Where does any of this stuff appear? Where does this come to us? What's the connection with our experience?
Tells you why there's lions around.
No. Do we?
In the Ark Kodesh.
Okay. So let's talk about Aron Kodesh. Here is the ark of a synagogue in Alsace, in France. So let's look a little bit closer at this. By no means do all arks look like this. So we call an ark an aron. That's the Ashkenazi name. What's the Sephardic name for an ark? Heichal. So the Sephardic name for an ark is temple. Our name is I don't want to make assumptions. The Ashkenazi name is Aron, which is the ark, which is inside the tabernacle or inside the temple. Okay,
which contains the Torah.
Which contains the Torah. So my basic suggestion is that when we look at an ark, what we're looking at is a representation of the temple, which in itself is a kind of representation of the world. Okay, so we have here. We have not all arks have these features, but many do. And when they appear, I think that they're. So these are. We've got Yachin and Boaz here. Now at the top, not at all naturalistic. We have something like a tympanum. Okay, and we have some animals. What are those animals? They're not done. No, they're pretty primitive-looking lions, but those are lions. Okay, so I'm going to suggest not that anyone thought of this connection themselves, but there's some we're linking to the Kruvim. Is my suggestion. We know that Kruvim can be lion-like, and I think the fact that I think that we've got an association with the Kruvim. And somehow, I don't know, people thought that you can't represent Kruvim. That would be a violation of the second commandment. But lions somehow were... Lions were kosher, okay? And these lions are standing guard. And what are they holding? What's this?
Is that a crown?
It's a crown. Okay. So in a Greek temple, at the top, you're going to have like a snapshot of what's going on in the Olympian realm, with the gods of Olympus. We can't do that. But we have a stand-in for representation of God. So I suggest that what we have here, the crown represents the presence of God.
Or is it Torah? Or is it Torah?
Well, the Torah itself is a representation for...
That's true.
Right.
But because I'm looking at the parochet itself, it says you have a
yes.
Keter Torah.
Right. The crown is, we call it Keter, right? Kaf, Keter Torah, and the crown here also, right? So I'm suggesting that this is a miniature Beit HaMikdash, which is itself in a kind of miniature world, with a tympanum, with a pediment, that sort of triangular space. The way it is here, it often isn't that shape. And a crown, or the word Torah, or could be, what about luchot? What about tablets?
It's been pointed out that in synagogues in late antiquity in Eretz Yisrael, you have the ark is a niche. There's a niche, and that's where the Torah goes. And one article I read points out that in a pagan temple, in the niche you would have the statue of the god.
Yeah. I think that there's a kind of standard, right?
So Torah.
The Torah represents the presence of God.
There are luchot there on the side. There's engraving on the side, 5 and 5.
Where?
On the side, in back of the lions. Behind the lions' tuchas.
Okay, so this over here is a reference to the. Well, that says Shiviti Hashem l'nadi tamid, and this one says Dal lefnei ata omed.
So it's not the luchot, it's the other key phrase.
But those phrases are saying.
But they look luchot.
They look luchoti.
They look luchot-like. It's true, luchoti. So I have set Hashem before me constantly. By the way, for the Jews of, this is another discussion, but for the Jews of Ashkenaz, for the Hasidei Ashkenaz, oftentimes we say Judaism prefers the sense of hearing to the sense of sight. We're told that a gazillion times. Rabbi Sachs talks about it again. Right. Just read the stuff that the Chachmei Ashkenaz wrote. They were all into the sense of sight. They said, you want to have a prophecy? Here's what you do. You take a space, fill it up with lots of water, put on white clothing, and gaze at the water until you and your students see visions. They said, when you pray, Shiviti Hashem, you should visualize that you are seeing the presence of God.
They're the ones who preserved the Hechalot texts.
They did. They actually say that you should like imagine you're seeing something. I won't say exactly what it is, but it might have been. Okay, and then know before whom you're standing. In other words, this is God. That stands for God. I'm not saying that this is God, but that when you're standing and you're focusing on that, and you open it up, it's a revelation. Every time you open it up, it's a revelation. And it's called the Parochet. What's behind the Parochet? That's the Holy of Holies. So this just goes on and on. And by the way, it's not just in synagogues, but
if you look at the pillars and the stuff at the top, you can imagine two Atzei.
Yes, the two staves of the Torah. Okay.
Sephardi synagogues use some of the same imagery or not?
They don't use Atzei because they
in terms of lions.
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question.
We'll have to discuss with the residents party.
So it isn't just temples that we have this. It isn't just temples. We also books. So this is the Vilna Shas, the Vilna Talmud. From
it's 4.
That's wrong.
Columns.
Okay, so
it's holding up like the foot though for the word.
So we've got lions up here. I think there's Or Kruvim again.
Wow.
We've got over here. We've got royal velvet. Okay. The lions are protecting. Also, we have a sha'ar. We've got a gate, which tells you something important is behind there. And it's true. We have 4. We've got 4. I'm more interested in the fact that we've got a pair. We've got pairs. So I would suggest that this is okay. Look at if you see the stone chumash. It's got lions holding up luchot. The first edition had curved luchot until someone pointed out to them that the Talmud in Sanhedrin says the luchot were rectangular, so they had to change the picture. But you've got lions holding up the luchot. It's the same thing. They're the same thing. Books can also be miniature worlds.
Yeah.
Hafoch ba v'hafoch ba v'chulaba. Right.
What you said before about that hearing is more important than seeing, was that?
I think that's a common, and maybe it's true. I don't know.
But the Gemara, I think, Gemara is always lo doma shmiel ariya. That hearing does not compare to seeing.
In the context of court cases,
maybe in context of court, I don't remember what the context is.
Yeah, but the question is. It's nuance. That question is nuanced.
Yes.
Because it depends on the context. Devarim is about Shema.
Right.
And yes, there are places your eyes saw, and you yourself. I mean, that's some of the tension.
You heard a sound, but you wasn't.
So it's there's a tension that plays.
The book of Devarim
that plays itself out. I mean, Torah Sheba'al Peh only works through hearing. Doesn't work through seeing. It
may be that in the absence of as we lost land, we lost sovereignty, we lost temple. That the visual aspect of our tradition became weakened somehow. And there's a beautiful and very sad piyut for Yom Kippur, which says Mar'eh Kohen.
Right.
It was so wonderful during the time of the temple to see Mar'eh Kohen, the appearance of the high priest as he came out with so much finery. It was so beautiful, and to remember it makes us.
Except we sing it in the past periods of years. It's a boisterous, singing, joyous.
Well, you could say that the establishment of Medinat Yisrael has
transformed,
and also brought back some of the visual in ways that are
Elliot Wolfson has an article about this visual hearing stuff.
Yeah.
One of his early collection of essays that's actually accessible to read.
Okay, one more picture.
Because he's hard. Yeah.
I found this fascinating, on Tisha B'Av,
the Holocaust.
my daughter and I visited the Holocaust Museum. This is very, very interesting, and I have not read anything about the.
Which is also interesting.
I have not read anything about the intent of the architect or the planners, but you have here the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center talks about a reference to the past, right? That's this part. You enter here, and then this is the future. Sort of facing up facing the terrible things that happened in the past, and then you move through chronologically towards the future. So from black to white, from darkness to light. Okay, and over here, what are these guys?
2 columns.
What are these guys?
Pillars.
Those are Yachin and Boaz.
Are there?
I don't know if the architect says they're Yachin and Boaz. I
Oh,
say
yeah,
they're Yachin and
different.
Boaz. Okay, there are two columns. They are made of meshwork, which is the way the Book of Kings describes parts of Yachin and Boaz, and they've got kotarot. They've got capitals. I think the word koteret is used actually. There's a modern word for capital, for what's at the top of a pillar, is the koteret, the crown, the crowning thing. And I think that what this is saying is that this is leads to a discussion about ways of remembering the Holocaust, or what it means to us that we invest so much in remembering the Holocaust. But I think that what you have here is this is a kind of a shrine, and those pillars give it structure, that you know that you're entering it. There aren't any kruvim here, but in a sense that this building also is using traditional Jewish imagery to express it's a certain kind of microcosm. At any rate, I'm more interested ultimately in the way we experience microcosm in our Batei Knesset, in our synagogues, and even in our books, so that even if we leave aside the question of how big